In this lesson, we're going to be learning about validations we can apply to date type questions. I recommend that you always use validations when you're using date questions in your survey because these type of questions are quite easy for interviewers to make mistakes when entering. There's a few different types of validations we can employ on dates. For example, we can make sure that a date is not in the future if it shouldn't be. We can also make sure that dates are in the correct sequential order. For example, you shouldn't be starting school before you were born. And finally today, we're going to learn about a function which can allow us to calculate a difference between two dates as an integer year. This will allow us to check that the date of birth matches with the respondent's age. Let's take a look at all the operators we can use with date questions.
First of all, we can use is equal to or not equal to tell us if dates are on the same date or make sure they're not on the same date if they shouldn't be. Next, we can have relational operators like less than or equal to. This can determine if date 1 is later in time than date 2. And finally, the operator we'll be working with today is called full years since. This function will return a numeric integer of the full years that we have between two dates. So in our example questionnaire, we have this question here, B6. How old is the household member? This is entered as an integer, age in years. So what I want to do is validate this and make sure that it's correct in relation to the birth date for that household member. So what I need to do is calculate the full number of years which have elapsed since the birth date and the date of the survey. You might remember back in Module A, that question A19 is the date of interview. So this is the date that I'm going to be comparing to against the birth date. To calculate the full years in integers to make sure that B6 is entered correctly. So the first thing that I'm going to do in the designer tool is have a look at question A19. What I'm going to do to A19 is select this button here, which is the current time. This means that instead of opening the calendar for the interviewer to select the date on, it's going to give him a button which will stamp the time, meaning that he can only record the current correct date of the interview and make it better for our validation. Next, we're going to jump forward to B6. So remember, we've already made several validations on B6 for age, but we're going to add another one. So the validation I'm going to write here, I want to make sure that self, the value in B6, is equal to question A19 dot full years since B5. So the full years between today's interview date and the birth date selected in B5 should be equal to the number which is input into B6. And for my error message, I'll write something like check birth date and age. Let's see how this works. So first of all, at A19, we can see now that instead of opening the calendar input, we have this button here to record the current time. And that gives the current date of interview. So next in Module B, for each household member, I'll have to ensure that the birth date and the age are matching. So let's make this just 1 year old. Now if I put in 1, we should be okay. But if I put in 2, then we'll get the error message.
That's all for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will use date validations on your surveys in the future. Anybody who's done data cleaning for paper-based surveys involving date questions will know just how messy they are. So we can use our validations to make our data much cleaner. Join me next lesson, and we're going to take a look at a couple of common validations that we can use in social research.